You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
Attorney General William Barr blocked ex-Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin from pleading guilty in George Floyd's death. Now, officials say Barr rejected the plea deal because he felt like it was too soon and that the investigation into Floyd's death was in its early stages. Officials told the Associated Press that the former police officer was prepared to plead guilty to third-degree murder in George Floyd's death before Barr blocked the plea deal last year. Now, on May 25th, bystander video captured Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck as Floyd cried out that he couldn't breathe for almost 9 minutes. Floyd's death sparked outrage not just in the U.S., but around the world. Many activists called for the defunding of police departments across the nation. Chauvin is scheduled for trial March 8th. He faces charges of second-degree murder and manslaughter. The 3 other officers involved in Floyd's death will face trial later this year. Joining me now to continue this discussion is attorney Ben Crump. Ben Crump, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, Derek Chauvin could be behind bars right now if Barr hadn't rejected his plea deal. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's very intriguing when you think about the fact that one of the things they said would be accomplished by him ending this plea would be that the protests, the unrest would likely come to a halt once he was held accountable. But you remember then President Donald Trump was using the Black Lives Matter protests all around America after George Floyd as political rhetoric, saying that Democrats could not control their cities and that he was the law and order president and that he was going to rein in these Black Lives Matter protesters, which was very interesting considering the fact that when they had the protests and the illegal actions done on January 6, 2021, he wasn't that law and order president. So I think this may be bigger. This may be part of a bigger dynamic where this Attorney General Barr, they did not want to see the protests stop.
So what you're saying, as we know, former Attorney General Bill Barr, his thoughts were in line with Trump a lot of the times. And as it's come out yesterday that he rejected the plea deal simply because he said it was too soon and that the investigation was in its infancy. But you're basically saying that there has to be a bigger picture here. And that's not at all the reason behind this.
What I'm saying is one could look at all of the dynamics at play, and we will never know what was in his mind or in his heart when he prevented the plea of the officer who kept his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to be held to account using the pretext excuse that the investigation was too early. Well, they convict black people all the time when there's little to no investigation. What was different about this situation? The fact that you had the video that showed the crime that he committed. It was clear that he caused George Floyd death and that he was the person most culpable of causing George Floyd to no longer be able to live. And the fact that he says it's too early to have him in a plea of guilty to murder is asinine. The video from day one told us that Derek Chauvin was guilty of murder.
Ben, a lot of people are on the same page as you, and I know when I read this report yesterday, I was saying to myself, was the video not enough? It's clear in the video what Derek Chauvin was doing. It's clear that George Floyd was in distress and he was calling out for his mother as Chauvin had his knee on his neck for that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So it's really strange that Barr said it was too soon. And like you said, if Derek Chauvin, maybe if he were a black officer, the situation would have been different and he would have been charged and sentenced possibly for the murder of someone. Now, I was there during the George Floyd protests. I was in Minneapolis on the ground reporting in May and June. And so I spoke to a lot of activists who were saying to me that they don't believe justice will be served in this case. They believe, especially where Derek Chauvin will have a separate trial from the other 3 officers, that he's going to get off. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't ever take it for granted when a white police officer unjustifiably kills an unarmed black person in America, that it is a foregone conclusion that he will be convicted. However, I do believe this evidence is overwhelming that Derek Chauvin will be convicted of killing George Floyd. With that said, we are never, ever surprised when they enter into the intellectual justification of discrimination to further engage in the legalized genocide of colored people. So we don't take it for granted. We all have to be focused in Minneapolis on March 8th until we hear the judge gavel come down, finding him guilty of murder, murder, murder.
Ben, before I let you go, has the family said anything in reference to this new news?
I'm sorry?
Has the family said anything in reference to this new news about former Attorney General Barr?
You know, the family has been focused on trying to prepare themselves for the trial, so I don't think they have dealt with these issues at all. You can imagine the emotions they're going to go through watching this trial, as all of us are going to go through. I'm certain that that video will be shown 100 times from every different angle. And to us, George Floyd is a hashtag. To them, that is their brother, their father. I mean, remember Philonise and Rodney slept in the bed with George when they were little boys. And to watch him have to suffer like that and they not be there for him is heart-wrenching. And so we just pray that they can find a purpose from all this pain that they're having to endure.
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking. And like you said, Ben, for all of us, even if we didn't know him, just watching that tape on repeat, it was devastating to see something like that happen to an American, right? To happen to someone like George Floyd. We will be following this case as we have been doing, and we will stay in touch. Thank you so much, Attorney Ben Crump.
Thank you for covering this important matter.
All right, I want to open this up to my panel. Now, Candace, what are your thoughts on former Attorney General Bill Barr basically rejecting this plea deal that could have landed Derek Chauvin in jail?
Well, you know, even if he had landed him in jail, Derek Chauvin said, I'll go to jail for 10 years, which is not a lot of time, especially if we're going to find out down the line that he gets off a little earlier because of good behavior. So that really is nothing when you look at the life of George Floyd that was taken away. But certainly there had to be some strategy behind William Barr rejecting this idea that he go to jail on a third-degree manslaughter charge. And certainly I think that Ben Crump has hit the nail on the head, obviously, in that Bill Barr is not someone who has great sympathy for Black men. Look at what he did in lifting the federal moratorium 6 months, just a few months before the ending of Donald Trump's term. He did that for a reason. He made sure that Black men were put to death, and in the most expeditious way than we've seen from any other president, lifting the moratorium. So there was more than we know that was going on behind the scenes. This wasn't Bill Barr just saying, no, I believe that, that we should have some more investigative work into this because Derek Chauvin will probably be found guilty. He was doing this as part of a political scheme, just like Crump said.
And like you're saying, Candace, when it comes to Bill Barr, there was an interview that kind of went viral last year where he was saying that he didn't believe police brutality was a thing. But he was saying that racism wasn't a thing. But in the same breath, he talked about how systemic issues are a thing. And so essentially, he was admitting that racism is a thing. And so we know that he isn't for the Black community. We know that he isn't for the George Floyds in this country. And so to see him reject that, of course, it does not come as a shock. Was there something else you want to say, Candace?
Well, I was just saying that, yeah, and certainly we've seen that not only this, but in other contexts in terms of what they think, not only about Black men, Black people, the Black Lives Matter protests. This was all part of a bigger scheme. And the fact that Derek Chauvin found it just, had the privilege in him enough to say, not only do I accept 10 years, but I would like to go to federal prison. And in addition to that, I do not want to be sued down the line for civil rights, and which is why we're dealing with William Barr in the first place, because this would have been a civil rights issue that they would have had to make go away. And when we look at cases historically of people being sued for police brutality and then police getting off, they generally go further and sue for their civil rights, and that's where they have their wins. So Derek Chauvin was saying, yes, give me this little sentence, and then down the line, I don't even want to be put back on the stand for civil rights. It really doesn't make any sense, and it all would have worked extra well in his favor. That's
a good point, Candace. Now, Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, I talked about this last night on the African History Network show, and Newsone.com has an article about it, as well as NBC News. NBC picked it up from the New York Times. So I posted it also on our Facebook fan page. So some people were saying they were happy that the plea deal was not accepted because they want Derek Chauvin, former officer Derek Chauvin, to be put on trial. I found it interesting that he did not want to face federal civil rights charges. Okay. We know the bar is high for federal civil rights charges. You have to prove willful intent. It probably applies here. Willful intent probably applies here. But the other thing was, Attorney Crump, I think, made the point, or somebody alluded to the point, that maybe they did not want the protest to stop. If Officer Derek Chauvin had have pleaded and gone to prison, a lot of the protests out in the streets probably would have dissipated. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump juxtaposed the protests with law and order and campaigned on this, okay? And the Wicked Witch of the West Wing of the White House, Kellyanne Conway, basically got caught saying that to a certain extent the protests were good for Trump and his reelection. The protests out in the streets, because he's saying this is what streets are going to look like if Biden is president. But wait a second, this is what they look like under the Trump administration. Okay, so it may have been a tool to say we want these protests to keep going on so we could campaign on this and try to stay in office.
That was good. As you said, Michael, he was doing a lot of projecting, and that just goes back to inciting the Capitol insurrection, where during the debates he was saying, stand by, stand back. Basically, we have to take our country back. Right.
Stand by and stand back to the Proud Boys. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, Mustafa, we're going to end with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, we can just deal with the facts. Trump was dealing with a failing economy. Trump was dealing with a pandemic. So, he wanted these types of things to continue to go forward, to take away from, some of the core issues that he was failing on and continued to fail on until the last day that he was in office. But we should also remember the value of this show. When A.G. Barr was being up for the confirmation process, we began to talk about folks really need to pay attention to him. He was a smooth operator, and people, didn't see through the veneer that he had put on and thought, well, maybe he'll take a moderate stance. Maybe he'll actually care about all communities and do the right thing. And we called out on this show, y'all pay attention, y'all get engaged. Make sure that you're reaching out to your elected officials to make sure they're asking the right questions. So when we don't do that, then we end up with these types of situations that have repercussions and ripples that continue to follow out through the 3 or 4 years that people are in these positions. So, it's such a shame that he would interject himself into this process where he would not have done it if it was a person of color.
All right, folks, back to our Road Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends, Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.